It was the perfect day for a wedding, a union that the villagers had eagerly anticipated for months. Adana, the chief's daughter, was the embodiment of grace as she stepped out of her father's compound, her white gown shimmering like a pearl under the morning light. Her laughter was music to Chijiok's ears as he stood at the altar, but his heart pounded with a secret fear that threatened to overshadow the joy of the moment. As she walked toward him, her smile wide and unwavering, Chijiok clenched his fist to steady himself. Would she still smile like this if she knew the truth? The church bells rang out, a jubilant sound that echoed through the hills. The crowd rose in unison, their eyes fixed on Adana as she walked down the aisle, her father beaming with pride. Chijiok's palms grew clammy, his heart thudding against his ribcage. To the crowd, he was the perfect groom, respected, kind, and deeply in love. But inside, he felt like a fraud. Adana deserved everything: a husband, a home, and the children she often spoke of with stars in her eyes. Yet he could only offer two of those dreams. Adana reached the altar, her hand slipping into his. It was warm, reassuring, and brimming with trust. He smiled down at her, but his mind screamed with doubt. Will she ever forgive me for withholding the truth? The priest began the ceremony, his voice carrying the weight of ancient blessings. But for Chijiok, the words blurred together. He repeated his vows, his voice steady, though his heart was a storm. I, Chijiok, take you, Adana, to be my lawfully wedded wife. As he said the words, a memory surged forward, unbidden and cruel. Chijiok was just 16 when the fever hit. It came suddenly, like an ambush in the dead of night. His body burned, his joints ached, and his parents watched helplessly as he withered before their eyes. Days turned into weeks, and the healer's potions seemed to do little. When the fever finally broke, Chijiok was weak, but alive. He thought the worst was over, until the healer pulled his parents aside, her face grave. He will live, she said softly, but the illness has taken something from him. He may never father children. The words hit harder than the fever itself. At first, Chijiok refused to believe it. But as he grew older and sought answers from city doctors, the truth became undeniable. By the time he met Adana, he had learned to bury the pain deep within him. Her laughter was a balm, her presence a light he never thought he deserved. But as their love grew, so did his guilt. How could he tell her the truth when it might shatter everything they'd built? The crowd erupted in cheers as the priest declared them husband and wife. Adana's smile was radiant as they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand. But as they greeted the villagers, Chijiok felt the weight of his secret pressing down on him. The reception was a blur of music, laughter, and well wishes. Yet, even as they danced, Chijiok couldn't shake the feeling that he was living on borrowed time. That night, as they sat together on the veranda of their new home, the air was thick with silence. Adana leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft and full of dreams. Chijiok, she said, do you know what I've always wished for? He knew. She had told him countless times. A home filled with children's laughter, a legacy to carry on their love. What is it? He asked, his voice tight. She laughed. A big family. 5 children, at least. Her words felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He turned to face her, his hands trembling. Adana, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you. She looked at him, her smile fading. What is it? Chijiok hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. Would she leave him if she knew? Would this night be their last as a happy couple? But before he could speak, a knock came at the door. Standing in the doorway was Adana's mother, her expression unreadable as she said, There's something you need to hear, now. Adana's mother, Neka, was a formidable woman. Though petite in stature, her presence commanded respect. Tonight, however, her face bore an unusual seriousness. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, stepping into the room, but I needed to speak with both of you before the night ends. Chijiok's heart sank. He had hoped for more time alone with Adana to gather the courage to confess his secret. Now, with her mother present, it felt like the walls were closing in. What's wrong, Mama? Adana asked, concern flashing in her eyes. Neka looked between them, her gaze settling on Chijiok. There's something about the past you need to know before you begin this journey together. I've kept silent for years, but now I feel it's time. Chijiok's mind raced. Was she about to reveal a secret? Had she somehow found out? I prayed that this day would come, Neka began, her voice steady but emotional. The day I could see my daughter marry a man as honorable as you, Chijiok. But there's something Adana should understand about her father's legacy and what it means for your future together. Chijiok exhaled softly, realizing the revelation was not about him. Yet he couldn't ignore the irony of Neka's words. Honor, she had said. How honorable could he be if he was hiding the truth from the woman he loved? Neka continued, her voice laden with emotion. Adana, when your father and I married, we faced our own challenges. For 10 years we had no children. The villagers whispered that I was barren, that I had brought shame to our family. Your father loved me, but the pressure became unbearable. Adana's grip on Chijiok's hand tightened. It was only after consulting a wise herbalist in the mountains that I conceived. That journey taught us that sometimes the path to parenthood isn't straightforward. But love, true love, can endure even the heaviest burdens. Neka's gaze softened as she addressed Chijiok directly. Marriage is more than vows and celebrations. It's about facing the storms together, no matter how fierce. If ever there are trials ahead, promise me you'll lean on each other. Chijiok swallowed hard, her words hitting him like a plea from his conscience. I promise, he said, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside. Adana hugged her mother tightly. Thank you, Mama. Your strength is an inspiration to us both. As Neka left, the room fell silent once more. Chijiok felt a lump in his throat. Neka's story had offered a momentary reprieve, but the weight of his secret felt heavier than ever. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Adana noticed Chijiok's distant expression. Is everything okay? She asked softly. He looked at her, his eyes full of pain and longing. Adana, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you long ago. She sat beside him, her expression turning serious. What is it? Chijiok took a deep breath, his hands trembling. When I was 16, I fell gravely ill. The fever, it left me with complications. His voice faltered. I can't have children. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Adana stared at him, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. You can't? She whispered. Chijiok shook his head, tears pooling in his eyes. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave me. Afraid I'd lose you. Adana rose from the bed, pacing the room as she processed his confession. Her dreams of a large family, the laughter of children filling their home. It all felt like it was slipping away. Why didn't you tell me before? She asked, her voice trembling. I didn't want to lose you, Chijiok said, his voice breaking. I thought maybe I could make you happy without children. But now I see I was wrong to keep it from you. Adana turned to him, her voice cold and cutting. How can I trust you, Chijiok, if you couldn't trust me with this? Adana's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Chijiok flinched as if struck, but he knew he deserved her anger. Adana, he began, reaching out to her. I didn't mean to deceive you. I was scared of losing you, of being judged unworthy of your love. She stepped back, her arms crossed defensively. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not that you can't have children. It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. How could you stand there, looking me in the eyes, and let me dream of a family we could never have? Tears glistened in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, her pride refusing to let them fall. I need time to think, she said, her voice steadier now. Please don't follow me. Before he could respond, she grabbed her shawl and stepped out into the cool night. The door closed softly behind her, but to Chijiok, it felt like the slam of a gavel sealing his fate. The next morning, Adana was nowhere to be found. She had returned to her parents' home, leaving Chijiok alone in their small house. Word of her abrupt departure spread quickly, and whispers began to ripple through the village. At the marketplace, women huddled in small groups, speculating about what could have gone wrong so soon after the wedding. Do you think they had a fight? One asked. Maybe he did something unforgivable. Another chimed in. By midday, the rumors had reached Adana's mother, Neka, who wasted no time confronting her daughter. "What's going on, Adana?" she demanded, her tone sharp. "Why are you back here? Did Chijiok hurt you?" Adana shook her head. "No, Mama. He didn't hurt me physically, but he kept something from me. Something that changes everything." When she explained the situation, Neka's face softened. "I understand your pain, my daughter. But marriage is not just about the easy moments. It's about forgiveness and finding a way forward together. Have you thought about what your life will look like without him?" Adana looked down, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Neka leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Are you willing to give up love for the sake of a dream that might still have other paths?" Adana decided to seek counsel from the village elder, Mama Ejima, known for her wisdom and impartiality. She found the old woman seated under a baobab tree, her hands deftly weaving a basket. "Mama Ejima," Adana began hesitantly, "I need your advice." The elder looked up, her eyes kind but piercing. "Sit, child. Tell me what troubles your heart." Adana poured out her story, sparing no detail. Mama Ejima listened silently, nodding occasionally. When Adana finished, the elder was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Child," she said finally, "love is never perfect. It is like this basket I weave. There will always be gaps, spaces where the threads don't meet. But those spaces don't weaken it. They give it character, make it unique." "But Mama," Adana protested, "how can I overlook something so fundamental? He hid this from me?" Mama Ejima nodded. "He did, and that was wrong. But ask yourself this. Does his mistake outweigh the love he has shown you? Can you build a life together, even if it looks different from what you imagined?" Adana sat in silence, the elder's words sinking deep into her heart. As Adana stood to leave, Mama Ejima placed a hand on her arm and said, "The choice is yours, child, but remember, sometimes the path we fear most is the one that leads to the greatest joy." Adana returned to her parents' home, her mind heavy with Mama Ejima's words. That night, as she sat alone in her childhood room, she allowed herself to remember all the moments she had shared with Chijiok. The laughter, the kindness in his eyes, the way he had always put her happiness before his own. Her dreams of a big family still lingered, but she began to see them differently. A family wasn't defined solely by children, was it? It could be the love they shared, the home they built together, and the legacy of kindness they left behind. The next morning, Adana made her decision. She dressed carefully and walked back to the house she shared with Chijiok. The villagers watched her with curiosity, but she ignored their whispers. This was her journey, and no one else's opinion mattered. When she arrived, she found Chijiok sitting on the veranda, his head in his hands. He looked up, his eyes red and filled with guilt. "Adana," he whispered, rising to his feet. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong to keep the truth from you. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. You deserve better." She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "You hurt me, Chijiok. Not because of what you can't give me, but because you didn't trust me enough to share your pain. But I've realized something." "What?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "That I love you," she said, her eyes glistening. "And I won't let this mistake define us. We'll find a way forward, together." Chijiok's breath caught, and he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I don't deserve you," he said. She knelt beside him, taking his face in her hands. "We deserve each other, Chijiok. Flaws and all." As they embraced, a knock came at the door. Chijiok opened it to find a young boy holding a letter. "This is for you," the boy said, handing it over before running off. Chijiok opened the letter, his hands trembling. It was from Dr. Emika, a doctor he had consulted years ago in the city. "Dear Chijiok," it read, "I recently came across new treatments for conditions like yours. If you're willing, I believe there's a chance we can help you. Please come to my clinic as soon as possible." Adana read the letter over his shoulder, her eyes widening with hope. "Chijiok," she said, her voice trembling, "this could change everything." He turned to her, a cautious smile forming on his lips. "Do you really think so?" She nodded. "Even if it doesn't, we'll face it together. But we have to try. Over the next few months, Chijioke and Adana began their journey of healing and hope. They visited Dr. Emika, who started Chijioke on a series of treatments. The road was uncertain, but they faced it with unwavering determination. In the meantime, they focused on building a life filled with love and purpose. They became mentors to orphan children in the village, pouring their love into those who needed it most. The laughter of children soon filled their home, not as they had initially imagined, but in a way that was just as fulfilling. 1 year later, Chijioke and Adana stood under the same baobab tree where Mama Ejima had given her wisdom. They held hands, their hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them closer than ever. Life may not always go as we planned, Adana said, her voice steady, but it's the love we share that makes it beautiful. As the sun set over Umukwu, they knew they had found something rare and precious, a love strong enough to withstand any storm.
Thanks for watching this video. Do so to subscribe.